we go for launch.
5.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2.
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
Now, composers are arrogant, especially when we're talking about our music. But the fact is, the arrogance is generally hiding great insecurity. You have to let your ego go. If you're smart, you're really doing more listening than talking. You really aren't in charge. The director's in charge. Your job is to translate their feelings about their movie into music. One more time. Hearing the downbeat, boom.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your Mission Commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen.
And on this episode of Planet 8, we're going to be taking a deep dive into some of our favorite motion picture soundtracks. Straight away, we'll kick it over to Chief Engineer Bob. Bob, what is it about listening to certain soundtracks to some of your favorite movies brings you enjoyment?
Well, I do very much enjoy listening to soundtracks, and I always have. I mean, I used to buy them on records, those round vinyl things that you played with a needle, and cassette tapes, 8 tracks. I'm that old. And I don't know. I always, because I love the movies so much, listening to the soundtracks, you can kind of get lost in it, and the images from the movies come back into your mind, and you can kind of relive the movies that way. Also, if I'm, when I was younger and doing homework, or if I'm sitting around, doing doing regular work. I mean, I have an iPad usually on my desk at work now, and I'll usually play music. So it's kind of nice not to have to listen to words. So it's cool to, I don't know, they kind of distract you when you're trying to think about stuff. But when it's just music in the background, that's cool, and you basically, depends on your mood, I think I'll listen to some Bond music, or maybe I'll do some Godzilla, or maybe I'll go over and, do an old Universal film or something. So, there's usually soundtracks for whatever mood you're in.
It's interesting, Bob, because, growing up, we all had vinyl records, and, you go get a 45, whether it was the Beatles or, Ozzy Osbourne, whatever genre of music you listen to. But I remember, and we all have a list of records, soundtracks that we like. But I remember one of the first soundtracks that I bought wasn't really a soundtrack. It was the story of Star Wars. And it was just basically sound bites from the movie telling the story with John Carpenter's music. Do you remember
John Carpenter?
John Carpenter.
That would have been a real rarity.
That's a later episode.
That was a collector's item, let me tell you.
A little later episode seeping in here.
I think we're talking Johnny Williams, maybe.
Yeah, not to start off your list early. Hopefully, your first soundtrack's not on your list. But what was your guys' first soundtrack? Do you remember?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Thinking way back. First
and we can come back to that later on in the episode.
Well, I know two that I bought. And I don't think I actually bought soundtracks until I was in college.
A late bloomer.
One I had, well, they were still LPs, though.
Right.
They were still vinyl. One was a collection of James Bond themes, music from the James Bond films. And the other was the soundtrack to The Road Warrior.
Oh, nice.
And
music
yeah,
for drive-by.
Well, exactly, because I would take it and put it on cassette. You know, you had your little cassette player under your turntable, and you could record whatever was on the LP, and then put it on your cassette, and then go out in your car and drive around and listen to it.
Cool.
Yeah, I would, you know, speaking of Bond, I'm pretty sure my first soundtrack was probably Live and Let Die when it first came out on LP. And yeah, I had a few Bond soundtracks on record back then, including, you know, they had various collections of the theme songs and things. But I'm trying to think if there was something before that that wasn't like a kiddie record.
Yeah, I had kiddie records too when I was growing up.
I'll tell you, that Popeye soundtrack was great.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, we had like Yogi Bear and Flintstones and all that stuff too, but I don't know. I don't really count any of that.
Zoo Review.
I mean, there were Disney. I had like Disney soundtracks.
Yeah, Pinocchio.
I think Jungle Book was like an early one.
Mm-hmm.
But,
well, we could do this the entire episode, kids, but let's go ahead and dive into some of our favorite soundtracks. Bob made a good point. You know, sometimes it just, you don't want words, you just want music. For me, it you know, if I'm doing something at work or if I'm traveling home on the bus or the train, you just pop in and your imagination takes over and you remember, you know, this is where this happened, this is where that happened, and you know, your imagination does a lot of the work for you too. So you can sit there and, you know, with your tablet or your phone and watch the film. Most certainly now. Back then we couldn't do that. But straight away, let's go over to Chief Engineer Bob. What's one of the picks that you have for favorite soundtrack?
Well, you know, it's funny that you should mention like driving and all that. I mean, I have to drive out to Vegas later this week, about a 9-hour drive. I'm thinking maybe I'll throw the soundtrack for Speed Racer on there and try to make it like an 8-hour drive or 7-hour drive. But that was not one of my choices, even though I love it. Actually, going back in time, I went with Bride of Frankenstein.
Whoa.
I was kind of like looking at some of the Universal soundtracks, and I have another one coming up, but Bride of Frankenstein, Franz Waxman, I just thought that is an excellent soundtrack. And La La Land Records came out with the CD for it fairly recently. And it's just the crescendos they have in there. Like, they reveal the bride, and you have that the big crescendo and when she comes out. And I think the amazing thing is, you know, all that music from Bride of Frankenstein was actually recycled like 3 times for the Flash Gordon serials with Buster Crabbe.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. So, but yeah, Bride of Frankenstein, that's the only soundtrack that Franz Waxman did for Universal, which I thought was interesting because it was so well done, and it was one of the earlier films. You would think they'd bring him back, you know, for another one. Though, interestingly enough, he did do the soundtrack for Rear Window.
Ah.
So that's a little something right there. But, yeah, I think Bride of Frankenstein, just excellent. And I think that was one of the first soundtracks where, like, you had character themes. Like, the monster had a theme, the bride had a theme.
Right.
Know. And then, of course, you know, as they're together, he kind of mixes the themes. And that's been done in other movies, but I'm pretty sure that was the first one where the characters were actually defined by the themes they had in the movie.
Yeah.
So, Franz Waxman, Bride of Frankenstein, go to La La Land Records and pick it up because it's an excellent one.
All right.
I mean, it was still, you know, sound. They had been making sound films for a little while, but it was still relatively, new as far as figuring out how to do the soundtracks. And, because if you look at like when Dracula came out, they were just using Swan Lake and, established works in the film.
Well, Swan Lake, it was just like the opening theme, but then the rest of the film, there's like no music at all.
Right.
And that was because that was like 31.
Mm-hmm. I want to see.
Yeah, and I think films were pretty much silent till like 29. So, yeah, that was just like, what? We got to put music over this thing? Yeah.
Right. They're still figuring it out.
Yeah. And even the original Frankenstein, that was, about the same time.
Yeah.
Really, they didn't have a, it had a soundtrack, but it was kind of pretty minimal, I think, still.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think 33, you had King Kong, and that has an amazing soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I should have picked that. Let me go back. But no, Kong definitely has a really good soundtrack. And, that was very, very early days of scoring music or scoring films.
Yeah, those early guys, I mean, they were still basically feeling it out, figuring out how to do it and, how to make it work with what was going on with the film. So,
plus you had like full orchestras. Which was nice. Now, of course, later on, like John Williams would have a full orchestra for films and things like that, but maybe, John Barry probably. But a lot of the soundtracks would tend to go for like a smaller, lower budget type orchestra. But I think the early films, though, they were very, music seemed to be a very important part. And it almost seems, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but it almost seems like as the decades went on, soundtracks were maybe not quite as important a part of the film as they used to be. But we can discuss that as we go on with our other picks. But
yeah, because I think it sort of ebbed and flowed. I think when you got to the era with John Williams and some of these other composers, then the soundtrack took on more importance again.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, now this is going way kind of off track, but like what movies today actually have a soundtrack that, because a lot of times I'll go watch a movie and it's like, I won't even realize that there was music in it. Because on some of these older films, you see the films and you come out of the theater, you come away humming some of the music or, having one of the themes stuck in your head. But today, that doesn't usually happen, at least for me.
Well, yeah, one of the questions I had when we were discussing this episode is, do we talk about just a piece of music from a film or the soundtrack? And we decided it was going to be soundtrack. And so, look, I love the Marvel films, but I don't own any of the Marvel soundtracks. I mean, there's bits and pieces of the Avengers music I like, Captain America, even Superman versus Batman. I don't own that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like the Avengers theme, and they kind of kept that throughout all the films. But a lot of them just weren't that unique or that prevalent.
You think about, go ahead, Walker.
Well, I was going to say, I think we may be in another ebb period again, because I think, we had some strong themes and soundtracks in the 70s and 80s. But, right now I would agree. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of really strong soundtracks. There's certainly, I would tend to agree with Bob. I mean, I don't come out of these Avengers or Marvel films thinking too much about the music. And the same could be said for a lot of the other, big franchises we currently have.
I'll say this as far as like soundtracks recent years, it's going to be more so television for me, like Battlestar Galactica. Bear McQuarrie did great work on that series.
He also did Godzilla King of the Monsters.
There you go. So it's interesting. Well, I'll tell you what, let's move this along though. And Karen, what's one of the picks you have for us?
So one of my favorite soundtracks, which I listen to repeatedly, sometimes, like you guys have mentioned, when I'm working, especially if I'm having to do some writing, I don't want to have a lot of words that will distract me. So I like to put on a soundtrack. But I also like to listen to this one in my car, and that is Jerry Goldsmith's soundtrack for Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Great pick.
Jerry Goldsmith has done so many great films, especially genre films. He did Planet of the Apes, which is an amazing kind of eclectic soundtrack. He did Logan's Run, Aliens. So he's done a lot of different films already in the genre. But I think with Star Trek: The Motion Picture, he really hit it out of the park. And it's interesting too, because like so many other things associated with this film, it didn't really, it wasn't going well at first for him as he worked on the film. Especially, he was trying to craft the theme for the Enterprise, and doing a little reading about this, he really didn't come up with the final theme until he saw some of the final visual effects work for the film. Mm-hmm. And so he finally got that music together almost at the last minute. He changed over 25 minutes of music in the film, and some of that work was done as late as December 1st, and the film was being released December 7th. So even though now you can hear this soundtrack, and it's an amazing, very beautiful soundtrack with a lot of kind of lilting themes in a lot of places. It sounds like it was put together amazingly well, but some of it just came together really quickly. And, you have sort of on one side all of the sort of heroic stuff that goes with the Federation, but then there's a completely different musical theme that goes with V'ger, and V'ger
Yep.
has this very heavy percussion and brass, and apparently that was really a lot of that was inspired by the work of Bernard Herrmann, who people will be familiar with. God, he did everything, but I always think of him from a lot of the Ray Harryhausen films.
Right.
But in this case, Goldsmith took a lot of inspiration from Herrmann's work on The Day the Earth Stood Still. So when he was doing the V'ger music, a lot of the ideas that he developed for that was directly influenced by Herrmann's work on Day the Earth Stood Still, and the kind of, almost electronic and dissonant kind of sounds that were used in that film. And of course, they also had this device that Craig Huxley built. Craig Huxley has a history with Star Trek because when he was a little kid, he appeared in a couple of episodes. But he built this thing called the blaster beam, and it was made out of artillery shells and magnets. And anyway, it made all those weird wow sounds that you hear when V'ger shows up. So anyway, Goldsmith was good at incorporating like unusual instruments and sounds into soundtracks.
Wait, Walker. What were the sounds that it made?
It's interesting that he got a lot of influence from Bernard Herrmann and The Day the Earth Stood Still, because Robert Wise was the director of both films, that and Star Trek.
That's a very good point, Bob. So yeah, I really enjoy this soundtrack a lot. It was nominated for Best Original Score and lost to a film called A Little Romance, which I don't know anything about.
Who even remembers that movie?
I don't even know if the people who made A Little Romance remember that movie. But I think it's a really beautiful score. I will admit I'm still listening to my 20th anniversary collector's edition. I need to get the La La Land version.
Don't have the La La Land?
I know. I feel like such a... such an infidel. I don't have it, so I need to go and purchase that.
I would get that just for, and I know Larry and I talked about this on the podcast before, just the theme from when the Klingon ships show up. That is.
I really like that piece of music. I like Ilea's theme, which is really beautiful. Of course, the main title, which eventually got appropriated for the next generation. And it's funny because a lot of people didn't realize that. But
well, here's the question then. When you hear that theme just in and of itself, do you think of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, or do you think of Next Generation first?
Well, because I listen to the soundtrack so much, I think of the motion picture. But I bet you most people think of the Next Generation.
I think of a convention with Bill Shatner and Walker. I think you were with me, and someone asked, why are you guys using, because Star Trek 4 came out, why are you guys using the Next Generation's theme song? And he's like, that's not their theme song. That's our theme song. He was
very indignant. They stole my song. That was my song.
Maybe Shatner really wrote it he was like the ghostwriter for that one.
And as an aside, I really think we should do a Shatner episode. We are so fortunate to still have the man with us, and to have his wits about him, even in interviews that he does now. I mean, he is so entertaining. Enough about the man.
All right, 100th episode, get him on the show.
I'll email
oh my
him
God,
and see.
that would be fantastic.
All right.
No, I agree with you, Walker. The when Kirk sees the Enterprise, and Bob's made fun of that theme before, but it to me, man, it's so great. And how many films have overtures? Mm-hmm. Still, I mean, we were talking about modern soundtracks, but the music really, and with the 4K release of the film on Paramount Plus, soon to be on Blu-ray, it's just a beautiful work. I mean,
it really is. It really is, yeah. And I got to get that La La Land. Maybe after the show, I'll go online and buy that La La Land.
Jump on there immediately.
Yep. Because it's an excellent soundtrack.
Cool.
Oh, definitely.
So, Larry, you got something for us? What music has been rattling around in your head lately?
I was thinking of Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, which I really, that's one of the earlier soundtracks that I got when I was a kid.
Speaking of Bernard Herrmann?
Bernard Herrmann. And, it just really sticks in my head. But I went ahead and I picked one of the first soundtracks I got, besides the story of Star Wars, was a double album. And when you opened, the fold of the album, the two parts, you saw Christopher Reeve flying as Superman. Yes, John Williams.
A Superman pop-up.
Not Carpenter, but Williams. A Superman pop-up. And, I should take a picture of it. I have it up in my Superman corner of my office here. And it's just a beautiful poster in and of itself. The music is so memorable. And, it just makes you feel good. And it'll take you back to the film like that. You hear, ba, 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 and immediately you're back,
Yep.
It's just, even at the end when Superman waves goodbye to you, bye, Superman. It just.
That was Larry in the audience there.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Superman. The cool thing about the theme, though, is it has that build-up. And off it goes.
Right. On the CD, it might be an anniversary, but it wasn't by Lala, just regular CD. And there's different versions of the Superman March. Some with more pomp and circumstance, some faster. What I thought was interesting is Jerry Goldsmith who worked with Dick Donner on The Omen, was originally going to do the soundtrack for Superman.
Oh.
But he got caught up in whatever movie he was going to do, and so they brought in John Williams to do the music.
How interesting. What would that have sounded like,
Similar to John Carpenter, but probably a little...
Yeah, John Carpenter's Superman.
Hey, you got to give it to John Carpenter, though, man. He scored all his films.
Oh, man.
They all pretty much sound the same.
Well, it's him as at a synthesizer or whatever, but...
We'll talk about it in a later podcast, I'm sure. Famously, the Margot Kidder was supposed to sing "Can You Read My Mind?" Picture that. But the powers that be didn't like that idea, so she just did the voiceover, And
she's like Shatner.
Well,
Rocket Man.
It hit the Billboard charts for like 3 weeks. I think it was like 50, maybe 49, 52, adult contemporary chart. So yeah, still holds up today.
Well, that was the thing up through the 70s. Soundtrack and movie themes and things were still becoming hits.
Well, and the thing is, you're going to know the film. It lost the Academy Award nomination. Was the most Superman was part of that.
I think I know which film it lost to for
Midnight
best score.
Express.
Wait, it lost to Midnight Express for best score?
Yeah, but he lost to the score for Midnight Express.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So
that was not the film I was thinking of.
Go. What were you thinking of?
I thought for some reason I was thinking it was Chariots of Fire.
Oh, dun 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 dun. Wasn't that 84 or 86?
I must be thinking of a different film.
I'm thinking it was later.
Dun, 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 dun,
yeah, because they utilized that for like Olympic, all kinds of crap. What was fun is that in this Superman soundtrack for the motion picture, they actually have Lex Luthor's lair. And in the movie, Luthor wears like a Hawaiian shirt, and they have like a Hawaiian ukulele like playing did it terrible justice, but Hawaiian type music for his Luthor's lair. Anyway, I wish Lala or Mondo or someone would put out a Dilly Deluxe version of this soundtrack, but as of this recording, that has not happened yet. So
give it time. There must be like an anniversary or something coming up that they could cash in on.
Yeah, that's true. All right, let's circle back to Chief Engineer Bob.
Well, I'm going to go, maybe a couple decades ahead. And ahead of my first choice anyway. I'm not going decades ahead of Superman. But
yes, sir.
I chose Forbidden Planet.
Oh, that's a good one.
Louis and Bebe Barron. And that was the first all-electronic soundtrack. No musical instruments, is all electronic sounds. And basically the way they had done that is they started experimenting with this kind of sound. They did a concerto called Heavenly Menagerie, and that was the first electronic composition. And basically what they would do is Lewis would basically build all these circuits, and then he would overload the circuits and they'd record the sound as the circuit like overloaded and blew out. And he would just build like thousands of circuits, and they'd blow them out, record them, and then Bebe would basically take those, add some reverb, maybe run them backwards, run them forwards. Basically took the tape and would edit those together into what would sound like a musical composition. And so with Forbidden Planet, it was basically, that's how they did the entire soundtrack. just burning out circuits, recording them, and then putting them together, speed them up, slow them down, put them together into, like I say, a musical composition. Sometimes they would loop the sounds. That's why you'd get like the, over and over. And it just makes for an amazing soundtrack. It may not be one that you'd want to kind of just sit there and listen to straight through over and over, but just listen to it once through, and it's just an amazing experience. And just to hear all these different basically circuits dying out and being combined into composition.
I remember listening to the entire soundtrack. I was moving, and it was great music to listen to while you're packing all of your starships and figures and robots.
Well, that's the thing, too, because I even had the theme on my phone for a while as my ringtone. And it was really cool. You'd be walking down the street, and I was like, people, what the heck is that?
I always assumed it was a theremin or a similar instrument. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's what I thought, too. And then when I started looking into it, then it's like, oh, no, it's burning out circuits. Now, I don't know when the theremin first came in or first started being used, but I know it was used for Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yeah, so that would have been like 51.
Yeah. But, was it used before that? I don't know. Maybe someone can Google while someone else talks and we'll find out. But
let's see.
Yeah, no.
It just seems like an enormously expensive way to do things. To I'll just build all these circuits and then we'll destroy them.
Well, I mean, it's
record it.
Like I say, there was really no electronic music at that point. So it's like, okay, how do we make electronic music? And I guess his idea was,
and I'll tell you,
we get these circuits and
the music really is unlike anything in that period of time, and complements the film.
And it really sets the mood for the movie.
Right.
And and you even have all the different sound effects too, with you've got Robbie and his little levers clack away in his head, and you hear the and things like that. Mm-hmm. The monster from the id, the roar of that thing. Very, very creepy.
Yeah.
The ray guns.
So the theremin was invented in 1920 and patented in 1928. So it's been around quite some time. When it was first used in a film, I don't have the immediate answer to that.
Keep Googling.
Interesting.
Well, we got other stuff to do. So.
We need to move on. But that was a good pick, Chief.
It's just forbidden. Now I got to go back and watch the movie. I'm in the mood now.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to go back and watch all these.
Such a classic.
Walker, why don't you introduce us to your second pick?
So one of the things we've talked about in the past is how a soundtrack can often make or break a film. One of the things, I think we've mentioned, and certainly other people have talked about, is how Star Wars was helped immeasurably by its soundtrack.
Oh, yes.
And
you just look at the trailer for Star Wars and the music that they used.
Oh, yeah.
And then the film with John Williams' score. And
a huge difference.
Night and day.
Well, I mean, it just, and they use it for every film, but when the title comes up and you have the blaring, dun,
oh, yeah.
Dun, 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 and then it goes into the march, and the credit crawl or the story crawl at the beginning.
Well, it's like the perfect melding of sound and vision, right? So the music perfectly exemplifies what's going on in the story. So with my second pick, I feel it's the same thing, that the soundtrack went along with the movie so well and gave it such a boost that when you're watching the film, the soundtrack gives you that adrenaline. And I'm talking about 1987's Predator.
Ah, yes.
So the soundtrack is by Alan Silvestri. He had previously done films including Romancing the Stone and Back to the Future. Later on, he would go on to do some Marvel films, including the first Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. So,
well, in fact, he wrote that Avengers theme that we were talking about earlier that recurs.
Right. Which is one of the few memorable things from Marvel films.
It's like the only piece of music I can remember right now from any of the films.
But I think his work on Predator, I love that soundtrack. I've listened to it again and again. And it's a perfect melding of the visual with the audio. He uses an orchestra and a synthesizer, but the electronics never overwhelm things. I think it's a perfect mix of electronic with the actual instruments. He began his career as a drummer, and maybe that explains why the soundtrack is so percussive. I also really appreciate that because I used to drum, so I always love really percussive soundtracks. And it does a great job in evoking the jungle, the setting that the film is in. It has elements that are very martial for the commandos that are in the film. It has some tribal elements with a lot of these like rattles and shakers that are used, but it also has a high degree of like tension and suspense in the music that keeps driving it, to get you to that end where it's just Dutch versus the Predator, and it has similar, it kind of reminds me, it has different themes, right? So for Dutch, for Arnold's character, there's kind of these swelling instruments, these strings and stuff that portray kind of the heroic elements. And then for the Predator, you have more of these drums and sort of hissing sounds and electronic elements. There's like this sort of 6-note thing that goes through. It's almost like Jaws-like, and these like da-da-da-da. So, yeah, it's a really, really dynamic soundtrack that just kind of propels the film. And when you hear it, it's like you immediately like, oh yeah, that's Predator. Whether it's sort of the dun 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 dun, or the da 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 da. I think it's a great action soundtrack, but it has a lot of these really sinister elements that go with the Predator, and just works really, really perfect with what's going on in the film.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that film too. It's like there's a lot of, I guess you'd say, mystery or suspense because you don't really know. At the beginning, like he's camouflaged. Where is he? When is he going to show up? Almost like Alien. And, there he is in a tree. Oh, no, he's gone. And there's and the music reflects a lot of that.
Yeah, there's like these little bongo drums that come in sometimes and go boom, 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 and they kind of fade out. And it's, that sort of mystery element. Like, where is he? What's going on?
God, why do I sit here now picturing like the Predator hiding in a tree playing bongos?
It was kind of reminiscent to me of some of the percussion in the Planet of the Apes, the first movie, and it just added, again, another good example of the music really working well with the film and moving it forward and adding elements of surprise and mystery to what you're watching. And again, it's one of those soundtracks you listen to on the bus or while you're working or whatever, and your imagination picks up, what you're missing visually from watching the film.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like Planet of the Apes. When you hear that blare,
right.
It's like dun, 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 and you immediately go to the gorilla on the horse, and when they first show that, oh man, they're apes.
Right.
But yeah, there are definitely soundtracks, like music or even small, stanzas that immediately bring an image to mind. And it's like, it could be nothing else. It has to, it's this.
We need to figure out a way to do a viewer call-in or game show, name that tune, and play like bam, 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 bam. That's such a good soundtrack.
I got it from Entrada. I don't know. Years ago. I don't know if that's still.
Entrada tends to keep his stuff around for a while. It may still be on there.
You have to check it out.
What else we got here?
Well, we've already established Gary Goldsmith had composed the music for the motion picture. The motion picture was almost on my list, but what beat it out was The Wrath of Khan.
Ha! James Horner.
James Horner. This is one of his first gigs. The studio was looking to get Mr. Goldsmith, but frankly, he just was too much money. They were cutting the budgets left and right on this second Star Trek film, and it was, Bennett and Meyer wanted the music for the film to go in a different direction. The movie was going to have more of a nautical theme to it, and they just really liked James Horner's body of work up to that point. And, the samples that he gave them, like when Spock is running to the engine room to save the Enterprise, spoiler alert, we'd already established that song was used in, like, Krull. Was it the Aliens? The second Alien?
Yeah, Aliens.
I mean, it was like, but hey, again, this is a soundtrack that got the La La Land treatment. If you don't have that version of the soundtrack, I highly recommend it.
I do have that.
The liner notes are fantastic. I'm going to read you guys just a small portion here. It says, in preparing his primary thematic palette, Horner based his original material on Meyer's intent to make the link between spaceships and destroyers and submarines, and make the linkage between Kirk and Captain Horatio Hornblower. I mean, it's a well thought out, well put together CD by La La Land, as all their CDs are. I mean, I've got the motion picture, I've got the Wonder Woman television series. I think it's a 2 CD set, might be just one. But anyway, this soundtrack to me, it was very ballsy to take. The motion picture now is a very recognized theme. With The Wrath of Khan, they didn't go in that direction. The way they had opened up the dun, 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 which is Alexander Courage's, and then it just goes in this trumpeted, adrenaline, grandiose introduction to The Wrath of Khan. I love that. The ending, as well, it's very, very action oriented and effective in watching the film. This is one of those soundtracks that I can just listen to, and I pick up. Here's the Reliant now facing off with the Enterprise. Dun 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 dun.
The cues are really soft.
Oh my God! It's just and when the phasers are gonna, they knew exactly where to hit us. Who knew where to hit us? You did it, sir. You did it, Admiral. I did nothing except get caught with my pants down.
It was his britches, wasn't it?
Well, britches.
Caught with his britches down.
His first major score was written in 4.5 weeks. Everything on Star Trek: The Motion Picture was just done on the fly, and the writing of the script and the filming and everything was just, it's amazing how the whole thing came together. That's my number 2 pick. I thought about Bernard Herrmann and Psycho, That's another really, really solid soundtrack from start to finish. Yeah, but instead I went with Wrath of Khan. So
Khan.
On to Chief Engineer Bob's third pick.
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball in here because originally I was thinking of Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I love the themes in there, but it's not quite a cohesive soundtrack. I mean, you had Hans Salter worked on it, Herman Stein worked on it, Henry Mancini worked on it. So you had like a big eclectic combination of people to bring Creature from the Black Lagoon to life. But I was sitting here and thinking, and one soundtrack that I always thought was just amazing was Yuji Koseki's soundtrack for the original 1961 Mothra. And mainly because if you look at all the Toho monster films, they're all like monster movies, horror movies. Mothra was like a fantasy. And you kind of had to have not like an Akira Ifukube march or something in there. You needed something more fantastical. And Yuji Koseki definitely provided that. And very, it's very light soundtrack, but there's also some great crescendos. Actually, where Mothra had her theme. And then, of course, the Twin Fairies from Infant Island, they had their theme as well as the theme that they would sing that would basically carry on through almost all the movies that Mothra was in. And it was basically, Yuji Koseki was basically working for Nippon Columbia, like a record label. And he was just doing like classical music and things. His first composition when he was like 21 was called Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. And as it went on, a lot of the soundtracks from the Godzilla films and things would come out on Nippon Columbia. So I assume he was tapped into through that to do the film. And it was, like I say, it was one of the better soundtracks. In fact, they released like a 2 CD set. This was probably about 5 or 6 years ago of the soundtrack remastered. And it's just amazing. Just throw on some headphones and listen to it. This great sound, and you can hear like every little note. And it's
that's cool.
Definitely one of my favorites. Now, obviously, I love Akira Ifukube and all of the soundtracks that he did, but the Mothra soundtrack basically had its own distinct personality. Like I say, scoring it as a fantasy film rather than a hard monster or horror film.
Nice, good pick, Chief. Let me see, Walker. What do you got for us?
Well, I seriously considered going with Planet of the Apes. It's an excellent score.
Yep.
Very, it has a lot of dissonance and, kind of a very strange quality to it. But we've had Jerry Goldsmith. I already picked him once, so I thought, well, I'm not going to pick him again. I'll pick somebody else. So I went with the score of a film we've already talked about on the show, and that's The Omega Man, done by Ron Grainer.
Nice.
And so Ron Grainer's not a name you hear tossed around a lot when you talk about soundtracks. I don't know a lot about him. I do know that he worked on Doctor Who and The Prisoner, British TV shows that I assume most of our listeners will be familiar with. The Omega Man, a movie near and dear to me. I enjoy this film a great deal, and in no small part due to the soundtrack. This soundtrack is both orchestral and electronic in nature. There's definitely some experimentation going on there with the electronics. I mean, it's 1971, so he's trying out a lot of different things. You know, some of it is very jazzy. Some of it sounds almost like easy listening. Then there's just some very strange electronic stuff going on. A lot of strong percussion again, which is right in my sweet spot. Really enjoy the percussion. You know, it's another one. I think it goes really well with the movie. I think he was trying really hard to capture Charlton Heston's character in the film, which I think he succeeds in doing, and then just supplying a lot of the action, you know, complementing the action that was going on in the film.
Well, fun fact, one year we went to Monster Palooza and we rented a car, and Karen brought her CD with her, and we drove around L.A. proper listening to the Omega Man soundtrack.
Yeah, you can't beat that.
So if you've never driven around L.A. with the Omega Man soundtrack, you're missing out, kids.
But it's got to be like really early on a Sunday morning when there's not a lot of traffic. Right?
Yeah, I was going to say, you got to drive around early on a Sunday morning with a submachine gun in the front seat. But
scarf and a captain's hat helps.
A little ascot.
Ascot, yeah.
But it's a really good soundtrack. It's funny. I did a little reading, and it seems like, you know, some of the people in the soundtrack collecting community are divided over it. But it was good enough that Film Score Monthly magazine, who goes out and sometimes rescues these orphan soundtracks, they went ahead and they got the rights to it, and they put together the soundtrack, and they did a run of like 2,000 for their listeners, and it was so popular they put together another run of it, and that's how I got a hold of mine. Was through Film Score Monthly. I don't know where else it's available. I think I looked on Amazon, and I think people were selling it there, but I think it was the Film Score Monthly version. That was people were selling through Amazon. So if people are interested, they might be able to pick it up there. But it's a lot of fun. It's fun to listen to when you're driving around, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. All right, kids. Well, that brings me to my third pick. And again, you know, I kind of went back and forth on this. Initially, I was going to pick Godzilla versus Biollante, just because they took all the classic Godzilla music and they, you know, modernized it. You have electric guitar and you know, some changes in the tone and the music. It's still familiar, but just has a more modern take on it. But I went with the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers soundtrack, and this is Howard Shore did a great job on all three of the films, to be sure. There was some weird Academy rule about sequels, and they initially didn't put this as an Academy Award candidate. You know, they later ruled that that's okay, and so Return of the King was nominated, you know, a year or two later. But the music, I was talking to Bob and Karen before we were recording. Right away, the first bit of music, Gandalf and the Balrog falling down the pit, and it's just so, it's operatic. I mean, it just, oh my God. And even now in my mind's eye, I see, you know, the Balrog fighting and Gandalf and, you know, the dialogue and stuff. And then it reused some of the themes for, you know, the dwarves and the elves and the hobbits and, you know, Frodo and Samwise. And it's one of the soundtracks in a more modern film that helped you appreciate the movie and just really fall in love. I wish I could have seen the concert that they had. I don't know if you went to it, Bob. The one in San Jose, they had at the was it the Civic Center, or it was Howard Shore and all three films. Anyway,
no, you know, it's like
Maybe you did the Bond one. There was one of the ones. Bob and I both went to the Star Trek. We went to
Star Trek. I went to, with Bob Avon and I went to the James Bond one at the San Francisco Symphony. And then Debbie and I went to an evening of John Williams music there.
Oh, nice.
And that was very cool. But, my friend Aaron Cooper basically gave me the Lord of the Rings trilogy because he had gotten the, the billion hours director's cut box set hoop-de-doo thing. So he gave me the studio or the theatrical releases, and I watched them and I sold it off, and I haven't watched it since. So not a big Lord of the Rings fan.
It's not his thing. It's okay.
No. So I would not have gone to see a whole concert of music from it. But
I feel you because I'm not a Harry Potter fan, and people are like, "Well, you should like Lord of the Rings." I just didn't feel it.
Me either. I couldn't. I tried to get into that Harry Potter stuff, but it just, didn't do anything for me.
Now I will say the kid that plays Harry's friend, Ron Weasley. I can't think of the actor's name, but he is freaking brilliant in Apple TV's M. Night Shyamalan show, The Servant. And he loses his accent. He has this, like, Connecticut kind of, like, New York accent. And I'm just drawn to him whenever he's on screen.
Well, who's the kid that played Harry Potter? What's his name?
Daniel Radcliffe.
He was in that Sandra Bullock movie. It was hilarious. That with Channing Tatum, The Lost City.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
Very funny rom-com.
Well, he's in a movie now where he's playing Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah, I heard he was working on learning how to play the accordion.
He was good in this movie with Sandra Bullock. So, whatever he learned from the Harry Potter films, he's done okay. So
yeah. He played Frankenstein, I think, Dr. Frankenstein, number of years ago. And was he the doctor or was he Igor? I think he was the doctor. He's also in this movie with magicians. Jasmine loves that movie, and it's the Hulk is in it. Woody Harrelson's in it. Anyway, I digress.
A movie with magicians and the Hulk's in it? That's interesting.
Yeah. Who plays the Hulk? Mark Ruffalo?
Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah.
He's in it. Woody Harrelson's in it. That kid from Zombieland who played Lex Luthor, he's in it. And they're like magicians, and they're doing like a heist.
They're like con men.
Yeah,
I thought you meant like they were magical. Okay, yeah, I've seen that.
And Woody Harrelson plays himself and his twin brother, which is really hilarious. But anyway, back to theme or soundtracks.
Well, while we were all gabbing, I did find out that the theremin, the first movie that used the theremin, was a Russian film called Odna, O-D-N-A, which means alone, and it was made in 1930.
Wow.
So they were in on it real early. You said it was basically, 1928 that the patent was?
Right.
So, 2 years later, it was used in a Russian film called Odna, or Odna.
In Russia, theremin plays you.
That's right. Friends of the show provide us our exit music, Project Pimento.
That's right.
We have their link on our page. Check them out. And a theremin, all theremin band. Well, they have some percussion, but they do have the theremin in every single song on there. They have 2 CDs out. Email them, ask for a third. I remind them every once in a while, and they always say, "Oh, it's forthcoming," but. In any case,
but it's definitely if you like tune us out after we're done talking, you're definitely missing out on a cool theme at the end.
Yes, absolutely. Well, guys, any honorable mentions? Anything you want to add before we jump into our censor sweep?
Well, like I said, I was going to talk about some composers, but I mean, we don't have time really. But obviously John Barry. I love all his stuff.
Good one.
All the Bond films. He did King Kong. He did The Black Hole, which we covered.
That's right, he did.
And Barry Gray. Love Barry Gray. He did all the Jerry Anderson TV shows like Stingray and Fireball XL5 and Thunderbirds. In fact, speaking of humming tunes when you leave a theater, I went and saw Thunderbirds Are Go at a theater in San Rafael. And when I came out of it, I went into the bathroom to use the restroom, and there were 3 stalls. And all 3 stalls were occupied. And all 3 people in those stalls were sitting there, tapping their feet, going dun 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 dun. And it was like, it was just the most fun you could have in a bathroom, I think.
So, XL is a go, bawoosh.
That's right. So that was. Then we even talked before we started recording about Michael Giaccino and all the stuff that he had done.
Man.
And obviously, it really sticks out his theme or his soundtrack to The Incredibles.
Yeah,
which is quite incredible. But he also did the Speed Racer movie, which is like close to my heart. He did the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
He did John Carter, another film close to my heart. He did Rogue One. He did all 3 Spider-Man movies, the new ones with Tom Holland. I think he's also doing Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and Thor: Love and Thunder. So he gets around. He's doing a lot of stuff. But
he does.
Yeah. But, I would say of all the modern composers that are still working, I think he's like one of the best.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the top composers right now. Of course, obvious by his absence on our list is John Williams.
Oh, but we talked about him quite a bit.
Did we talk about him quite a bit? I don't know.
Not a bit. I mentioned him a little bit in Superman.
And then we were talking about Star Wars.
He was on our list. I'm sorry. Right. I completely forgot.
But I mean, he's amazing with Jaws and Star Wars and Superman and
Raiders
Indiana Jones. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's almost surprising that we didn't have him.
Lost in Space, the original series. He cut his teeth on Lost in Space as Johnny Williams.
Right.
And it is funny how many of these guys were doing stuff on TV first. I mean, Jerry Goldsmith was doing a lot of TV stuff as well. So
right.
Well, you had it's funny because the what was the name? Tomita, the kind of a Japanese kind of electronic synthesizer artist back in the day. And he started on like Kimba the White Lion and
oh wow,
and another show called Mighty Jack. So yeah, and, even though we're there, but yeah, a lot of people got their starts on TV. And if you go back and listen to the Lost in Space soundtrack and a lot of John Williams scores in there, you can hear a lot of influence that made it through to Star Wars and some of his other soundtracks.
Well, I'll challenge our viewers. Lieutenant Jasmine gives me a hard time. She hears little difference between the Superman march and the Star Wars introduction, the theme.
Are we talking like tin ear or what?
Yeah, well. So you guys listen and put some comments out there on our Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and our proper website, and let me know if you hear a difference between the two.
He's looking for ammunition.
Back me up here. Back me up.
Yeah, I'm thinking Jaws. I mean, Close Encounters. Bam, 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 bam. There are just theme or pieces of music that you hear, and it takes you to the film.
One very simple too, because he came up with some that are just like Jaws is what, 3 notes or something.
Right.
Well, yeah, because he said that he had played that for Spielberg, And Spielberg was like, "Is that it? That's all? That's it?"
Well,
but it works so well.
Lieutenant Jasmine listens to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Dun, 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 dun. She's like, "That's just Jaws sped up." I'm like, "Oh, shut up." She's ruining all that.
I think she's just messing with you.
I think she is too. I don't know if you guys have made it out to the Star Wars themed land in Disneyland.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Well, let me tell you guys, he did the theme as you walk through or under the bridge, at least in Disneyland. I don't know about Disney World. He did the score for that land, and it's so evocative. Without, doing the Star Wars march, it's very much a Star Wars experience, and I don't think he came out of retirement for it. I think he was still working, but didn't he come out of retirement to score the Obi-Wan series?
I believe so.
Yeah.
On Disney, so that'll be interesting to experience. Anyway,
but that's another one. Like, I can't remember who the composer is, but I really like the music for The Mandalorian.
Goranson.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great soundtrack. I actually bought the soundtrack. One of the few modern soundtracks I've got.
Did they have the whole soundtrack available?
They've got like episodes or seasons or whatever. You'd have. I think the first season you had to buy like one CD for each episode.
Right.
Or
something. I didn't. That's why I didn't do it, because I was like, I'm not going to.
I think I bought the first one, and then I bought one from the second season. But
we subscribe to the Apple Music thing, so we have access to all the stuff, but they bleed us every month. I mean, we subscribe to Apple every month.
So yeah, Ludwig Göransson. He's very good.
There's another guy who did the Westworld stuff. And I should probably look up his name too. Talk amongst yourselves.
Well, we have enough that we will probably at some point do a favorite TV themes and soundtracks.
Good on you. Let's get into our
Sensor Suite
with Chief Engineer Bob.
Yeah, Bob. In lieu of, I just bought four, because Lieutenant Debbie's coming. 4 very expensive concert tickets. So instead of doing a product review, I figured I'd just let listeners know where they can find a lot of these soundtracks if they're looking for them. One would be at Entrada, and we did mention them before. It's store.entrada.com. They have rare releases. They have exclusive soundtracks. Very large catalog. Cool guys. They even, when we did our Ray Harryhausen show, they supplied some of the soundtracks for that. They have a really nice soundtrack from Valley of Gwangi. And I remember years ago when our friend David Schechter came out with Creature from the Black Lagoon and jungle themes. I wanted that. I couldn't find it anywhere. So I actually found Entrada. They were in Berkeley. I went and knocked on the door, and they're like, "Oh, we're not a store. This is an office. We're online, But they let me in, and I got to go rooting through their stuff, and I picked up the sound. I picked up Creature from Black Lagoon. It was very cool. There are a lot of very cool guys over there. So check out Entrada.
Online. Don't go to the building.
Yeah, don't go there. La La Land Records, LALAND Records.com. A lot of cool soundtracks. We mentioned some of them in the show. Didn't they do the big Lost in Space set?
Mm-hmm.
And also the big Star Trek set?
Yeah.
I picked up the Star Trek set at Monsterpalooza, and that's just amazing. All the music is on that.
It is.
WaxWorksRecords.com. That's WaxWorksRecords.com. They have quite a few cool soundtracks. A lot of vinyl. And I've been buying a lot of the Godzilla stuff soundtracks on vinyl. And they sound so... That was Larry breaking a record right there.
Broke a toy.
It's like, this is what I think of vinyl. but I've been listening to the records a lot. And, you know, what really got me was a release of a 2 LP set of the music from Night of the Living Dead, which is a lot of like library music. But I thought it was, you know, for a film using library music, it was used very well. And so I have it all collected into a 2 LP set.
See, that's cool, Bob, because I was thinking it is just library music, but they have it composed in 2 albums?
Yeah.
Nice.
And then the last one would be mondoshop.com. Mondo, basically you sign up for their newsletter, and I think, well, every week or every other week they're coming out with a different soundtrack that they
Tiki
release.
mugs, soundtracks, posters, puzzles.
Yeah, they got a lot of stuff, but since we're talking soundtracks, they definitely have some cool soundtracks. So definitely check them out. So Entrada, La La Land Records, Waxworks, and Mondo. And
very cool.
I could go in all night, you know, and talk about sites where you can go download the stuff. But I'm a physical media kind of guy, so that's what I'm pushing.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Chief. And my friends, that brings us to the end of another episode of Planet 8. Stay safe. Take care of yourselves. This is Planet 8 signing off. Peace out.
On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet8Cast.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.
And it ends in a classical da 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 da.